Even though there's agitation in Washington state, there's so much more agitation in Massachusetts. I mean, it's so much more a hotbed than Pullman, Washington. So you find yourself in this more aroused community, racially, gender-wise, and so on, and that must have been very exciting.
It was, but I don't want to minimize what happened in Pullman, Washington.
No, I don't, no.
There was an intensely active anti-Vietnam War movement, of which I was strongly a part, as well as my ex-husband. In fact, he was the advisor to SDS. There was a lot going on in the black student movement at Washington State. I mean, may seem a little strange for folk who were doing much more dramatic things, but there we were, off to jail as well, in Pullman, Washington. And so coming across country to the University of Massachusetts was, yes, to come to a more aroused place politically, but we really hadn't left the desert. And I had the feeling, and I remember being very conscious of this, that it really all was a part of a pattern. One of the things that was really important in being isolated geographically was to keep in touch, to know what was happening, particularly in the Black Power movement, in the anti-war movement across the country.
And how did, in Pullman, how did you get information about what's happening in other places? I've been to Pullman. I know it's not an isolated place, but it is isolated.
But it is.
It is isolated.
But
it is
it
remote.
is.
How did you keep in contact with the larger outside world?
Both through the kinds of organizations that I was a
SDS.
part of, as well as just, as I think is more important in a geographically isolated place than others, through networks. People who would travel, who would come back, telephone calls, letters. This is before the email era.
And before faxes.
And before faxes. But the progressive, that it is left of center faculty during the 1960s really were very much in touch with each other.
And when you come to Massachusetts, I mean, that universe is just broadened
Exactly.
and widened. There are many, many more people, first right at the place, and many more people in and out and in and out, this kind of cross-fertilization. And that's got to be fairly exciting.
It was. It was an exciting period in Massachusetts. I'm still very, very much in contact with folk in that 5-college area. And it's been interesting for me to be aware of the kind of concern being expressed in that community about the aftermath of September 11th that I don't think I've sensed with the same intensity at a place like Emory or in Atlanta in general. Now, part of this is that the 5-college community of Massachusetts really is in a wee bit of a time warp. I mean, it's sometimes called the Happy Valley, but it's a place of unusual activity. You know, there's Northampton with a very, very large and highly politically active lesbian community. There are the colleges, 2 of which are women's colleges. You've got both Mount Holyoke and Smith. So that you know, that's not an ordinary piece of land there. And what has pleased me is to hear more questions being raised about the current state of the world and the role of the U.S., my country, in that world. Hearing more questions being raised from there than I'm hearing from many other parts of the country.
Do you think it's in part a geographical closeness as well to New York City as opposed to Atlanta or even Charlottesville? Or I was in California. It just seemed to me that people there were less engaged in discussion about these events in any sort of way, in favor, against, opposed, supporting anyway, that the geographical closeness created different reactions in them.
I think so. I was recently with someone from Texas who said, oh, well, basically we're just living our lives the way we used to. I mean, we're conscious of it, but yes, I think it is that. I think it can also be I think the history of tradition and of challenge that exists, even at a place like University of Massachusetts, but certainly in a town like Northampton, you don't get rid of that tradition when all of a sudden we're in a post-September 11th mode.
In its own way, that's the protest community
Exactly.
that transmits from generation to generation to generation that we were talking about earlier.